chosen one, anchor your spirit to what I am about to say right now. That restless feeling you cannot shake, the one that follows you into every room you walk into. I need you to sit with it for just a moment longer, because it is the very thing this message was sent to explain. The enemy has been working overtime this week for one reason and one reason only. He sees what is written on the other side of your confusion. He sees the door, and he is terrified of what happens the moment you understand what you actually did. It all shifts in the next few minutes. The confusion, the self-questioning, the sense that you somehow stepped outside the will of God. But hear this clearly, it is not ending because God gave up and started over. It is ending because of the choice you made, the one that left heaven completely speechless. Think back to that moment recently when neither path in front of you felt right. Maybe you stood at a crossroads and both options felt rehearsed, like someone else's destiny handed to you in a pamphlet. Maybe you had been given the safe path and the bold path, and something in your gut rejected both of them, so you did something no one expected. You went a direction that had no map, no guarantor, no applause, and the moment you stepped onto that road, everything went quiet. You did not find this recording by accident. The algorithm did not bring you here. God did. This is a divine appointment that was scheduled before the foundations of the earth were laid, before your name was written, before the two paths were even constructed. You are standing at the threshold of the explanation you have been waiting for. Stay until the very last second of this message, because in the next few minutes I am going to hand you the exact decree that reveals why heaven went silent when you chose the third path. I am going to walk you through the moment your decision was recorded in the courts of eternity, not as rebellion, but as revelation. And at the end, I am going to give you the declaration that seals this third path shut against every voice that has been calling you back to the roads you left behind. Do not click away. Your future self is begging you to stay, because if you leave now, you will walk back into a week of confusion without the verdict that changes everything. I know what the last 72 hours have felt like. The atmosphere has not been peaceful, and it has not been war. It has been something in between that is harder to name, a strange stillness, a pressure that is not quite pain, but is heavy enough to make you sit down in the middle of the day and stare at nothing. Maybe you were lying in bed this week, staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning, not anxious exactly, but deeply unsettled, like something enormous had already happened and no one had told you yet what it was. Or maybe you were in a conversation with someone close to you, and halfway through you felt completely alone, like you were watching the exchange from outside your own body, wondering how you arrived at this version of your life. You feel suspended, not lost exactly, but unanchored, like you pushed off from a dock and the shore is still visible, but you are no longer touching ground. And in that suspension, the enemy has started whispering a very specific lie. He is telling you that the reason everything feels this way is because you deviated. He is reminding you of the moment you did not take the path that was laid out clearly. He is replaying the decision you made that no one else understood, the direction you chose that did not come with a sign or a confirmation or a crowd cheering you forward. The accuser is telling you that you stepped outside the boundaries of grace, that you invented a path God never intended, and now you are suspended in the consequence of your own stubbornness. He is telling you that heaven is not silent because something powerful is happening. He is telling you heaven is silent because heaven turned away. But I need you to hear what the scripture actually says about this moment. Isaiah 43:19 says, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." Listen to that word, a way in the wilderness, not a way on the road, not a way on the path that was already paved. A way in the wilderness. God does not only move on pre-existing roads, He is the God who's not only move on pre-existing roads, He is the God who creates paths in places that had no path. He is the God who opens streams in territory that was dry. The third path you chose was not a departure from His plan. It was the territory where His plan had no choice but to manifest as something entirely new. Heaven did not go silent because it turned away. Heaven went silent because it leaned in. The heaviness you feel is not the weight of being outside God's will. It is the weight of being inside a moment so precise, so specific, so sovereignly constructed that even the atmosphere around you recognizes that something unprecedented is taking place. You think the third path was a mistake. You think choosing what no one else saw was recklessness. You have been waiting for someone to confirm that you did not ruin everything. Let me reframe your entire reality right now. You did not ruin anything. You revealed something. The moment you refused both pre-packaged options and stepped into the uncharted, you activated a dimension of God's faithfulness that only operates in wilderness territory. The two paths were real, but the third path was yours. And the God who made a way through the Red Sea when there was no road, the God who fed an entire nation in a desert that had no crops, the God who brought water from a rock that had no river running through it. That God has been waiting for you to stop apologizing for the direction you chose and start walking forward with the authority that belongs to every chosen one who dares to believe that God can make a way where there is no way. You are not behind. You are not disqualified. You are not suspended in punishment. You are standing in the wilderness right before the stream appears. If everything you just heard made your spirit burn, that was not this video. That was God confirming something he has been trying to tell you for months. But confirmation without action is the most dangerous place a chosen one can be, because the enemy does not attack those who stay asleep. He attacks those who are one step away from waking up, and that is exactly where you are right now. The inner sanctum was built for this moment, so you wake up every morning to a fresh word from God, spoken directly to your spirit. The link is in the first pinned comment. You will know if it is for you the moment you see it. You chose the third path. And before we go any further, if this message is already stirring something in you, if you feel like this was made specifically for you, there's a deeper resource I've prepared called The Chosen One's Guide to Walking Your Divine Path, an ebook that goes further than any video can. The link is in the description. Get it. You're going to need it before this journey is over. Now let's talk about what actually happened. Because here's what most people don't understand about the third path. It didn't appear by accident. It didn't show up because you were weak or faithless or forgotten by God. It appeared because you were chosen, and the enemy knew it before you did. The third path is always constructed specifically for the person heaven has marked. It's tailor-made. It looks reasonable. It looks safe. In some cases, it looks more logical than the two paths God originally set before you. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous. It was built to feel like wisdom when it's actually delay. It was designed to look like caution when it's actually fear wearing a spiritual disguise. There's an architecture to how the enemy works against the chosen. He doesn't come at you with obvious traps. He doesn't wave red flags or announce his presence with noise and disruption. No, he comes with something far more sophisticated. He comes with a path that looks almost right. A path that borrows the language of wisdom, the aesthetics of discernment, the posture of patience. And he lays it directly beside the one God prepared, close enough that in the dim light of uncertainty you can barely tell the difference. The third path doesn't smell like compromise. It smells like strategy. It doesn't feel like retreat. It feels like wisdom. And that is precisely why so many chosen ones have walked it for far longer than they ever intended to. Think about Moses. God set before him a clear path. Confront Pharaoh, lead the people, trust the voice in the burning bush. But Moses stood at the edge of that divine appointment and began negotiating. Who am I? He asked. What if they don't believe me? What if I speak and no one listens? He didn't choose rebellion. He chose the third path. The path of prolonged self-doubt dressed up as humility. And heaven didn't abandon him for it. But it cost him 40 more years of wandering before he moved in the direction he was always meant to walk. Think about what those 40 years actually looked like from the inside. Moses wasn't sitting idle. He was building something. He was living. He had a wife, a family, work, routine, the ordinary rhythms of a life that was real but reduced. He had constructed an existence right next to the burning bush moment, close enough that the memory of that divine encounter never fully faded, but far enough that he could convince himself it had been a vision, a mistake, a misunderstanding. That's what the third path gives you. It gives you enough life to keep you quiet about the life you left behind. It gives you enough movement to silence the question of whether you've truly stopped moving toward your assignment. Moses wasn't a bad man on the third path. He was a displaced man, a man of enormous capacity living inside a container that was never designed to hold him. And the fire that had spoken his name was still burning, still waiting, still holding the appointment that his fear had postponed. You see, the third path doesn't take you away from God. It just keeps you circling the thing He called you to. And you can spend years, decades, circling your own destiny, building a life right next to the one that was prepared for you, close enough to smell it, but never stepping inside. This is one of the most painful spiritual realities there is. To be close, not lost, close, not abandoned, adjacent. To live in the neighborhood of your purpose without ever knocking on the door. To watch through the window of other people's obedience and recognize what you see. To feel the pang of recognition when someone else steps into the kind of life your spirit has always known was yours. And to return home to the life you built on the third path, telling yourself it's fine, it's enough, it's what you chose. But the soul of a chosen one is not built for adjacency. It was built for occupation. It was created to inhabit the fullness of what God designed, not to live in its proximity and call it peace. But here's where it goes deeper. The third path wasn't just a detour, it was an agreement. And when you chose it, whether consciously or not, you made an agreement with a version of yourself that heaven never intended to exist. You agreed with the voice that said you weren't ready. You agreed with the wound that said you couldn't be trusted with something that significant. You agreed with the timeline someone else placed on your calling, a parent, a pastor, a person who hurt you at exactly the wrong moment. And agreements are powerful things in the spirit. What you agree with, you give authority to. What you give authority to, begins to govern your movement. And before long, the third path starts to feel like the only path, like there was never anything else. This is where the work of the enemy becomes almost invisible. Because once an agreement is made, it doesn't need to be reinforced constantly. It simply becomes the lens through which you interpret everything. Every closed door on the third path confirms that you were right to doubt. Every season of struggle on the third path becomes evidence that the bigger assignment would have been even more dangerous. Every moment of comparative comfort, every season where the third path produces something stable, something safe, becomes proof that God must have redirected you here on purpose. But He didn't. He's been watching you justify the agreement you made with your own fear and call it divine guidance. He's been watching you use the language of surrender to describe something that is, at its root, refusal. And His grief over this isn't punitive. It's the grief of a father who knows exactly what his child is capable of and watches them choose smaller again and again because someone or something convinced them that smaller was safer. You agreed with the wound. This is worth sitting with because the wound was real. The person who planted doubt in you at the wrong moment was real. The rejection that arrived just as you were building courage was real. The failure that occurred at the threshold of your breakthrough, the one that felt like a sign from God to stop, was real. But the interpretation you gave those things, that was the agreement. That was the moment you took something that happened on the road and used it to rewrite the destination. Wounds have a voice, and if you don't understand the difference between the voice of a wound and the voice of God, you will build your entire life around the testimony of your pain instead of the testimony of your purpose. And this is the path that leaves heaven speechless, not in judgment, not in disappointment, but in something closer to grief. Because God doesn't watch you wander in confusion and feel nothing. He sees the fullness of who you are. He sees the version of you that walked the first path, the one marked by surrender. He sees the version of you that walked the second path, the one marked by sacrifice. And He watches you build something smaller than what He designed, knowing that your hands were made for more, that your voice carries a frequency the world is waiting to hear, and that somewhere inside you, You already know this. Heaven's grief is not the grief of a disappointed employer watching a worker underperform. It is the grief of a creator watching a masterpiece get covered with a drop cloth and stored in a corner. It is the grief of a composer who wrote a symphony and watches the orchestra tune up and then never play. Every single note was written. Every instrument was assigned its part. The score was complete before the musicians ever arrived. And the silence that fills the hall when the performance never begins, that silence is not empty. It is full of everything the music was supposed to say, everything the room was supposed to feel, everything the audience was supposed to feel, everything the audience was supposed to carry home changed. And you are the symphony. You are the score that was written before you were born. And the grief of heaven is the grief of music that has never fully been played. What most people don't realize is that the ache you've been carrying, that low, persistent feeling that something is missing, that you're not quite where you're supposed to be, that ache is not depression, it's not anxiety, it's not a sign that something is wrong with you, it's a prophetic signal. It's the sound of divine purpose pressing against the walls of the smaller life you settled for. And it won't go away, not with more success, not with more comfort, not with more distraction, because it was placed there by the one who called you, and it will continue to sound until you finally turn around. You have tried to medicate this ache with achievement. You have tried to silence it with busyness. You have given it the name of restlessness and called it a character flaw. You have taken it to therapists who helped you manage it, and to churches that helped you pray around it. But no one told you what it actually was, because most people have never been taught to identify the sound of divine purpose pressing from the inside. It sounds like longing. It sounds like lack. It sounds like a hollowness at the center of an otherwise full life. People look at your life from the outside and see fullness, and you have to smile because you can't explain why fullness still feels like emptiness when you lie still at night. But I'm telling you now, that feeling is not evidence of ingratitude. It is not ingratitude dressed up as spiritual hunger. It is the sound of the called life knocking on the door of the life you actually built. And it will keep knocking, because the one who placed the call inside you is not capable of abandoning it. Now, once you understand that, you're ready for this. The third path doesn't just affect your future, it reconfigures your past. This is something most people have never considered. When you chose the third path, you didn't just miss an opportunity ahead of you. You began to reinterpret everything behind you. The failures you experienced on the third path started to feel like proof that you were never supposed to be great. The rejection you encountered began to look like confirmation that the calling was never real. You took the fruit of a wrong path and used it as evidence against your God-given identity, and that is the enemy's deepest strategy. He doesn't just want to redirect you. He wants to use the consequences of redirection to convince you that the original assignment was a fantasy. This is the architecture of spiritual deception at its most sophisticated. He sets up a path. He waits for you to walk it. He allows the natural consequences of that displaced path to accumulate, the relationships that don't quite fit, the work that doesn't quite sing, the seasons of effort that produce results far below your capacity. And then he brings you those consequences as evidence. He hands you the fruit of the wrong road and says, "See, this is all you're capable of." He points to the struggles of the third path as proof that the first two paths would have destroyed you. He uses your exhaustion against you. He uses your exhaustion against you. He uses your disappointment against you. He uses the very real pain of having wandered as ammunition to keep you wandering. Because the most effective cage is the one made of your own history, the one that uses the weight of your past choices to convince you that your future choices are already determined. But consider Elijah beneath the juniper tree. This was a man who had just called down fire from heaven, a man who had outrun a chariot, a man who had stood against 400 false prophets and won. And yet there he was, under a tree, asking God to take his life, convinced that he alone was left and that everything was over. He had taken the fruit of spiritual exhaustion and used it as evidence that his purpose was finished. And what did God do? He didn't preach to him. He didn't correct him. He fed him. He let him sleep. He met him in his humanity before he spoke to him about his destiny. Because God knows that sometimes the chosen one needs to be restored before they can be redirected. The tender precision of what God did for Elijah deserves to be examined slowly. Elijah had just come off one of the greatest spiritual victories in the history of Israel. The fire had fallen. The prophets of Baal had been exposed. The power of heaven had been demonstrated through him in a way that should have been the beginning of a national revival. And instead, he ran. He ran from a threat. He ran from the voice of one woman, Jezebel, and in running, he ended up under a tree, asking to die. This was not weakness. This was the anatomy of a chosen one under assault. And God, who sees everything, did not arrive with a sermon. He arrived with bread. He arrived with water. He arrived with rest. He let the body heal before he addressed the spirit. He knew that Elijah's theology had become distorted by exhaustion, and that distorted theology cannot be corrected with more theology. It can only be corrected by first restoring the vessel that holds it. If you are exhausted right now, if the weight of the third path has left you running from what once gave you life, God's first word to you is not a correction. It is an invitation to rest in His presence before you receive your next instruction. And what's coming next in this message will likely surprise you, because it goes to a place most spiritual content refuses to go. Stay with me, because here's the real confrontation. The third path wasn't just built by the enemy. In some cases, you built it yourself, not out of wickedness, not out of rebellion, out of pain, out of a deep need to control something in a life that felt wildly out of control. When the first path required surrender, you built the third one. When the second path required sacrifice, you built the third one. Because surrender and sacrifice both demand that you release something, your comfort, your timeline, your need to understand every step before you take it. And some part of you decided that releasing those things was too costly, so you constructed something that felt like movement but required no real letting go. You stayed busy without being obedient. You stayed spiritual without being surrendered. You stayed in the vicinity of your calling without ever fully stepping into it. This is the confession that most spiritual conversations never arrive at, because it's uncomfortable to acknowledge that the cage you're living in was partly built by your own hands. It's easier to identify the enemy's blueprint, to point to the wound, to trace the trauma that drove you toward the safer option. And those things are real. They deserve to be named. But there comes a moment in the journey of every chosen one where they must stand before the mirror of their own agency and acknowledge that they were not only acted upon, they also acted. They made choices. They laid bricks. They built walls that looked like protection but functioned as containment. The third path is not always a trap someone else set. Sometimes it's a room you built yourself out of the materials of your own fear, and then decorated so carefully that it started to feel like home. You stayed spiritual without being surrendered. Sit with that for a moment. Because spiritual activity and surrender are not the same thing, and the enemy knows how to use one as a substitute for the other. You can pray eloquently and still be in control. You can worship passionately and still be protecting the parts of your life that God has been asking you to open. You can fast, serve, give, lead, and still be fundamentally unwilling to place your hands off the wheel of the specific thing heaven has been asking you to release. Spiritual activity without surrender is the most sophisticated form of the third path there is. It looks holy from the outside. It produces fruit, not the fullest fruit, but enough fruit that the people around you affirm your walk with God, and you lose the urgency to go deeper. And the detour continues, dressed in the garments of devotion. And here's the bridge from that truth to the one that cuts even deeper. Because what you probably haven't yet named, and naming it is what sets you free, is that the third path came with its own rewards. That's why it was so easy to stay on it. It gave you a measure of success that was just enough to quiet the ache without fully answering it. It gave you relationships that were real but not quite right. It gave you a platform, a position, a paycheck, a persona, all things that aren't bad in themselves, but things that became substitutes for the life heaven actually designed. And substitutes are subtle. They don't announce themselves as replacements. They simply slowly, steadily become the thing you organize your life around. Until one day you look up and realize you've built an entire world on the third path, and dismantling it feels impossible. The substitute is perhaps the most underestimated spiritual danger of our time. We understand temptation. We understand outright sin. But we do not talk enough about the substitute, the thing that is good enough to satisfy momentarily but insufficient to fulfill eternally. Ishmael was a substitute for Isaac, not a wicked thing, not a sinful creation, a real person, a real relationship, a real life, but not the promised one. And the danger of Ishmael is not that he was evil. The danger of Ishmael is that Abraham loved him. He invested in him. He built a life around him. And when God said, "The promise comes through Isaac," Abraham's grief was real because the substitute had become precious. The third path works this way. The substitute you've built isn't trash. You love it. You've poured years into it. You've grown inside it. And this is exactly why the moment of returning feels more like loss than like liberation. Because you are not leaving something worthless. You are leaving something real in order to inhabit something true. And the difference between real and true is the difference between a life that functions and a life that fulfills. But this is where you need to hear something that changes the architecture of everything you just received. Coming up, the one thing most people do not expect to be the final lock on their breakthrough. But first, this has to land. Nothing you've built on the third path disqualifies you from returning to the path God prepared. Read that again slowly in the interior of your spirit. Nothing, not the time you spent, not the choices you made, not the people you disappointed, not the version of yourself you became on the wrong road. There is no detour in your life that the sovereignty of God cannot fold back into your original design. This is not a blanket for passivity. This is not permission to continue circling. This is the revelation that when God calls something chosen, He does not unchoose it based on the path it wandered. He recalibrates, He redeems, He takes the years the locust has eaten and restores them in ways that the linear mind cannot calculate. Not because you earned it, but because He is the kind of God who finishes what He starts. Let the full weight of that settle. The sovereignty of God is not a theological concept reserved for seminary classrooms. It is the living, breathing reality that no decision you have made on the third path has the power to exceed the redemptive capacity of the one who called you. The prophet Joel records one of the most stunning promises in all of Scripture. "I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten." Not some of the years, not the years you deserve to have back, all of them. The locust years, the years of the third path, the years of the agreement, the years of the substitute. God promises their restoration, not through a time machine, not through erasure, but through a divine recalibration so precise and so sovereign that the years themselves are recontextualized, repositioned, and repurposed into something that serves your original assignment. The detour becomes data, the wandering becomes wisdom. The pain becomes the very depth from which your most powerful ministry will eventually flow. Think about Ruth. She was not an Israelite. She had no natural right to the covenant, no bloodline claim to the promise, no theological reason to expect redemption. She was a widow from Moab who had been walking a path that looked like it was leading to obscurity. But she made one decision, one turn, one declaration of allegiance, and the entire trajectory of her story shifted. She ended up in the lineage of the Messiah, not because her past was perfect, but because her pivot was real. What Ruth understood, perhaps without the language to articulate it, is that a single genuine reorientation carries more weight in the economy of heaven than a decade of proximity without commitment. She didn't need to justify her past. She didn't need to explain Moab. She didn't need to present credentials or prove that she was qualified for the covenant she was choosing to step into. She simply said, "Where you go, I will go. Your people shall be my people. Your God, my God." And in that declaration, in that one sentence of real surrender, she stepped out of every lesser path and into the story that would carry her name across every generation. This is available to you. Not the specific story of Ruth, but the principle that lives inside it, that genuine pivot is more powerful than perfect history, and that a single step of real obedience can redirect a trajectory that years of wandering had established. And now, the part you didn't expect. Here's the thing that's actually been holding you on the third path. It's not fear. Fear is the symptom. It's not the wound. The wound is the doorway. It's not the enemy's assignment against you. That assignment has limits. The thing that has been holding you on the third path, the deepest lock, the final chain, is that you have not yet fully believed that the first two paths are still available to you. Deep down, in the place you don't say out loud, you believe you missed the window. You believe that the appointed moment passed while you were on the third path, and that what remains is simply the best version of whatever you can build from here. You are living in a theology of missed opportunity, and it has become the invisible ceiling of your entire life. This is the diagnosis that changes everything, and it requires being named with precision. A theology of missed opportunity is not just a feeling, it is a governing belief system. It shapes how you pray. You stop asking God for the fullness of your calling and start asking Him to maximize whatever remains. It shapes how you dream. You stop dreaming the dreams of your original assignment and start constructing more realistic visions that account for the years you spent on the third path. It shapes how you relate to other chosen ones. You celebrate their breakthrough from a distance, with a joy that is genuine but tinged with a grief you can't quite explain, because their arrival on the path reminds you of the path you believe you can no longer access. The theology of missed opportunity is the invisible ceiling, because it doesn't feel like a lie. It feels like wisdom. It feels like maturity. It feels like the responsible acknowledgement of your own history. And that is precisely what makes it the final lock. But heaven doesn't operate on a window that closes when you weren't looking. Divine appointments are not cancelled when the chosen one is late. They are held. They are guarded. They are kept in the spirit, untouched and uncorrupted, waiting for the moment when you finally turn with your whole heart. Because the God who parted the Red Sea did not do it the moment Moses first stepped toward Egypt. He did it at the exact moment the people needed it most. Divine timing is not about your punctuality. It is about His precision, and He is precise enough to fold your entire third path detour into the story in a way that makes the ending more powerful, not less. Consider what that means practically. The years you spent on the third path were not years God was absent from. He was present in them. He was weaving things into you during the detour that the straight path would not have produced. The empathy you carry for people who are wandering, that wasn't built on the first path. The understanding of how the enemy constructs the substitute, that wisdom came from walking the third path long enough to see its architecture from the inside. The compassion you have for the person who is spiritually close but not quite in, you have that because you lived there. God doesn't waste the wandering. He mines it. He extracts from your detour the very things that will make your voice credible in the places where it matters most. The person who has never wandered can tell others about the destination, but the person who wandered and returned can tell them about the road. And that testimony has a weight that no amount of perfect obedience can manufacture. And here is where everything reframes. The reason your wandering left heaven speechless wasn't because you failed. It was because God could already see what you would become once you stopped. He could see the version of you that would one day stand on the path. He prepared, not as someone who had it all together from the beginning, but as someone who had wandered and returned, and who therefore carried a depth of wisdom, compassion, and spiritual authority that the person who never left the first path simply doesn't possess. Your detour became your credential. Your wandering became your testimony. Your third path, in the hands of a God who redeems all things, became the very thing that would make your voice undeniable when you finally opened your mouth and spoke from the place He always intended. There is a kind of authority that only comes from the far country. The prodigal son, when he returned, carried something his older brother didn't have. He carried the knowledge of what it costs to be away. He carried the memory of the famine that followed the feast, the weight of the pigsty after the inheritance, the particular texture of homesickness that can only be felt by the one who chose to leave. And when that son finally stood in the Father's house, restored, clothed, celebrated, his voice would carry something into every room he entered that his brother's voice simply couldn't, not because the brother's faithfulness was worthless, but because the returned wanderer had a testimony that penetrated the hearts of everyone who had also wandered and wondered if return was still possible. This is who you are becoming, not despite the third path, but partly because of it. And when you finally stand where God always prepared for you to stand, you will not stand there as someone who barely made it. You will stand there as someone whose journey back became the very message you were created to carry. So this is your moment, not next year, not when you feel more ready, not when the circumstances align, or the fear disappears, or the wound finally closes. Right now, in this exact moment, while something is shifting inside you that you don't have a name for yet, this is the moment you make the decision to stop building on the third path, not to abandon everything you've made, not to burn down your life in the name of obedience, but to turn, to reorient, to lift your eyes back toward what was placed in your spirit before you knew enough to doubt it, to choose again with everything you've learned on the detour working in your favor this time. The shift that is happening inside you right now is not accidental. Something is moving in the deep places, in the places beneath your thinking, beneath your theology, beneath the accumulated weight of every reason you've told yourself that the calling was too much, the path was too uncertain, the cost was too high. Something is loosening. Something that has been held under the surface of your life is pressing upward, and it carries the fingerprints of the God who placed it there before you were born. You don't need to fully understand it yet. You don't need to map out every step. You don't need to resolve every question or heal every wound before you begin. The invitation is not to perfection, it is to orientation. Simply turn your face, simply adjust the direction, simply say yes to what your spirit has been whispering to you in the quiet hours, the hours before dawn, when the noise of the third path goes silent and the original voice speaks again. And if you're ready to go deeper than this video can take you, if you want to understand the specific steps of returning, the way to break the agreements you made on the third path, the spiritual postures of the chosen one who is walking back into their divine assignment, that is exactly what the Chosen One's Guide to Walking Your Divine Path was written for. Every layer of this message goes deeper in those pages. The link is in the description. Don't let this moment pass without reaching for the next thing God has prepared for you. If this message has reached you today, it wasn't a coincidence. The algorithm didn't find you. You were brought here. And before you close this video, before you scroll to whatever is next, I want to ask you to do one thing. Leave a comment below and say, "I'm returning to my path." Not because the comment changes anything in the spirit, but because declaration is where alignment begins. The moment you speak it, something shifts. The moment you name where you're going, you stop being defined by where you've been. And the heaven that watched in speechless grief as you wandered will erupt in something that looks a lot like joy as you finally turn around and start walking toward the life that has been waiting for you all along. Place your hand over your heart right now and speak this with me. I release the third path. I release every agreement I made with delay, with fear, with doubt, and with the smaller version of myself that felt safer than my calling. I break every covenant I made with comfort that cost me obedience. I declare that my divine assignment is still intact. I declare that the window has not closed, that the appointment has not expired, and that the path God prepared for me is still lit and still waiting. I am not too late. I am not too frowned. I am not too froke. I am not too far from the place I was always meant to stand. I step forward now, not perfectly, not fearlessly, not with all the answers, but I step, and I trust that the God who called me before I knew my own name will meet me on the path I return to, the same way he met the prodigal son, not at the door but on the road, running toward me before I even arrive. I am a chosen one. I am walking my path, and it begins today.